Alright, so this is an overview of IPAM, which is IP Address Management. It's new to Windows Server 2012, slightly improved for Server 2012 R2. But the whole purpose of IPAM is to collect data related to your IP address assignment. This could be DHCP information and your DNS information along with your network policy server information. So it collects all of this and stores it in one place for your entire forest. So rather than keeping track of information on a spreadsheet like a lot of companies do, you can store it all in one location. And unlike a spreadsheet, when you need to request a new IP address, normally you would have to go to the one guy or girl that looks after the spreadsheet of IP addresses that have been assigned statically to switches, routers, servers within your organization. And then when you need the next available IP address, you go to that person and they'll allocate to you the next available IP, and they mark it down so that if anybody else needs a new IP, it can be issued and nobody has overlapping IP addresses. So this just takes that same idea and moves it into Windows Server so that everybody can view it. You can use role-based access assignments so that specific groups of admins can see it, others can administer it and request new IP addresses, and IPAM will automatically allocate a new IP address when you request one. It doesn't assign the IP statically to your server, it just simply sets it aside for you to then go about static assignment. You can, however, integrate it with DHCP and put a reservation in for an IP so that DHCP automatically gets reservation from IPAM and then allocates that IP through address assignment, through dynamic address assignment with a reservation. So that's possible. Another thing that you could do is you could script the request for a new IP address to be allocated from a static pool and store that in a variable, and then also include in that script using that variable to apply an address statically. So you could kind of use dynamic/static address assignment through IPAM. Alright, so that's the idea. You're maintaining a bunch of IP addresses in the server. Before you get started, one of the things you want to do is you just take a look at this is my domain controller, and I can see I just have a default domain policy. IPAM will create a series of IPAM related group policies, and this is the method that's used to control the clients so that to make them prepared to enter their information into IPAM. You could go about manually configuring them, but Microsoft recommends that because the configuration involves a lot of different settings, that you just use group policy and it simplifies it. So I'm just showing you this now to show that there aren't any IPAM policies. Other things to look at is that the DHCP server. So I have one DHCP server set up on my network currently, and within that DHCP server I have a scope. And if I take a look at the scope, there's the address pool. Starts at 20 and goes to 100. The thing about IPAM is that it'll capture this information. And if you went from 192.168.1 to 254 and then excluded, you use an exclusion range elsewhere so that there would be an exclusion here and you wouldn't allocate those addresses. IPAM won't allocate those addresses either. So let's say you use 1 to 254, but you're using the first 10 addresses for your default gateway and your domain controller. Well, those also won't be available within IPAM. So IPAM can't go to that pool. If you're excluding them for future use, IPAM won't issue those later. So what I'm saying is that it's important that before you install IPAM, or after, you can correct this afterwards as well, and IPAM will update. But you can change this pool so it doesn't include any of your static addresses that you want to issue. Okay, and that your scope options are correct. 1.1 for your gateway. So make sure everything is right in DHCP and that you don't have an exclusion that you want to statically allocate through IPAM later. Another thing I want you to take a look at is in your DNS. You may or may not currently have a reverse lookup zone. I have an old one from previous labs, but I also have this 192.168.1 in Azure ARPA. So it gets reversed, and I have PTR records. So this information gets pulled into IPAM as well. It'll look for it, and if you want to make it available in IPAM, you should actually configure this ahead of time and create a reverse lookup zone that matches your subnet. Okay, so Active Directory is functioning. I have a static IP. I have one DNS, one DHCP server. Everything's working in my organization. If I go back to my server 2, so this is server 2 here, and this is the one I'm going to use for IPAM. And I just take a look at the roles that are installed on it currently. So I have a static IP on the server, and you can see everything's been removed. Through different labs that we've done, we've added different things, taken things away, but the only thing I have left is file and storage services, web server. I've removed the branch cache. A lot of things are gone. The other thing, so the failover cluster has been removed, it's been destroyed and removed. When you go to the adapter, there's only one physical adapter, so the failover adapter is gone, and it has IPv6 and version 4 enabled, and I have a static address for IP version 4. Okay, to install IPAM, if you make sure everything is good to go, go ahead and install the feature. It is a feature. It's not a server role, so where is it? There it is, IP address management. Just check the box, installs the server tools as well. Let's go ahead and install that. Okay, so the installation is done. If I click on IPAM now, you'll notice I clicked on it right in Server Manager. So normally when we install something, it shows up under your tools, but there's nothing listed for IPAM. Okay, so that it's actually all set up through here, right in Server Manager dashboard. You click IPAM, and it gives you an overview of 6 steps to get IPAM configured and up and running. First one is to connect to the IPAM server. It's necessary that I'm at the same server, so I'm connected to myself as myself. But you could be doing this from another server. So first you connect to the IPAM server, and then you provision the IPAM server. So this will go through, and it says provide centralized management, monitoring, auditing of IP address space and the infrastructure. So it's collecting IP information, and it wants to collect it from these different services: DHCP, DNS, MPS, and your domain controller. And so what this is going to do is provision group policy objects to configure collecting this information throughout your entire domain. You have an option. This is Server 2012 R2 that I'm using, so I have the Windows internal database that I can use, or I can use the Microsoft SQL Server. If I have one up and running, I could connect to it and store the information in a SQL database. If you're using 2012, you didn't have this option. You only had the Windows internal database, but R2 extended it to have Microsoft SQL Server as an option. I'm just going to use the internal database. That's all. I don't have SQL up and running. And then you're asked for the method that you want to provision the managed servers. So when your DNS and your DHCP, for instance, are managed servers. So you're going to collect information from the managed servers and store it in IPAM. And so you could manually go to each one of these servers and configure all the settings that you need for IPAM to work. And there's quite a few. If you go onto Windows Server site, you need different firewall rules and a variety of settings for policies. So you're better off to use the group policy based method. Now it'll create 3 group policies using whatever prefix you put in here. So let's put in IPAM. And then so each one of the group policies will begin with the word IPAM, and click Next. It tells me that it's going to make these. See, there's the prefix IPAM. That's what I've written in there, and then DHCP for DHCP servers, DNS for DNS servers, and DC and MPS. So 3 group policy objects will be created, and then it says to go into PowerShell and run the invoke IPAM GPO provisioning command in each one of your domains. So the group policy objects are created, but they're not linked to your domain when this is done. You'll have to run the PowerShell command to actually link them afterwards. And this is set up for you, or if you choose the group policy object method that I have, you can't change it after the fact. The only way to change your group policy settings to uninstall IPAM, reinstall it. And the IPAM servers themselves don't communicate with each other if you have multiple IPAM servers. You have to make sure that your IP address assignments don't overlap. But one IPAM server can do your entire forest and store 3 years worth of information and hundreds of thousands of records, so it shouldn't be a problem anyway. Okay, so it says IPAM provisioned successfully. Great. Let's close this. And it says, so provisioned IPAM completed December 4th. Configure server discovery, domain selected. None. Okay, so I don't have a domain selected yet. Before I do that, there was the invoke command that was suggested or recommended that I use before I continue. So if I go back to my domain controller and I just take a look here, my domain, see there aren't any IPAM group policy objects listed here. These are old. Let's delete those. Your IPAM 1, it's not from this run through. So these are a variety of group policy objects, but you can see there aren't any that exist yet with the IPAM prefix. So just open the PowerShell on the IPAM server, and there is an invoke, and it's invoke IPAM GPO provisioning. And you put in your domain, and my domain is called bacon.local, and the GPO prefix name, and the one that I used was simply IPAM. Enter. So am I sure if I want to do this? Default's yes, and I'll go ahead. And we just hope that this works. Okay, so it's done. Go back to the domain controller, refresh, and now I've got the 3 group policy objects linked to the root of the domain. Okay, so it does filter out for those specific roles, so it doesn't affect everybody. It affects domain controllers, DNS servers, and MPS servers. Alright, so that's done. Next step is to configure server discovery. And for the bacon domain, I'll just add whatever servers I can find, and if found on the root domain, I'm going to search for domain controllers, DNS servers, and just press OK. And I'll start the server discovery. It runs a task in the background. Just have to wait for that to complete. If you're wondering what the task is, task listed here, server discovery automatically discovers domain controllers, DHCP servers, and DNS servers in the domain you selected. It doesn't say MPS servers. When it comes back, it may not find the MPS server that I have. And if I go back to my RWDC and I take a look at my different roles, I do have network policies server installed from previous exercises, and I still have network policies configured. Right, so it does perform the authentication for VPN clients, just as it did before. Right, so I never did remove those settings. But I don't expect the IPAM server to discover it, because it doesn't list it here. Okay, so that finally finished. That took quite a while. So it says that it did discover servers. If I click on server inventory, I can see them, set manageability status unspecified. But it does see the this is my RWDC, and it's got DC, DNS, and DHCP. Okay, so if I edit that server, I have the option to select MPS server, because it is an MPS server as well. And then I can change the manageability status. I'm going to change that to managed since it is managed by IPAM. There's some custom configurations. There's custom field Active Directory site, so you could put in a number of additional attributes if you want, but they're not actually required. So all I needed to do was check off MPS because it is MPS and change it to managed, and I'll say OK. And it's blocked as far as IPAM access currently. So now that I have this set in here that I want to manage the server, the Active Directory group policy will apply to it. Okay, so these group policies will apply to that server. So this is actually the server that I'm trying to manage. I want to speed things along, so I'll just gp update/force to pull those group policy objects that now apply to me or to the server. Make sure that's done. Okay, so that's completed successfully. I'll go back over to the other server. And although I'll refresh the screen here, it still says blocked access. It can actually take quite a while for this to change from unblocked to IPAM access. So I'm going to pause, maybe go to lunch. Okay, so now the IPAM access is set to unblocked. While you're waiting for that to update, there is a refresh server access status. You click on that once in a while. If it's still set with the red circle, eventually it will come up. Okay, so I didn't change anything. I just waited and kept clicking this server access status. Okay, so now that I have access to that server, it should pull information from it. If I take a look at IP address blocks, nothing. Ranges. No, I don't have anything yet. Well, let's go ahead and we'll create, if you take a look at under the tasks, there's add IP address range groups, an address range for an IP address. This is IP address ranges. If I go up here to blocks, the tasks will change, and it'll include add IP address block, and it's the block that you want to start with. So the largest network, so your major network, like I have 192.168.1 is my major network. If I was to subnet that after, so I would add that block, and then I would add address subnets within that block. Ranges are similar to your ranges within DHCP. So ranges could be within a subnet. They don't necessarily take up the entire subnet, but it could be a range within that subnet. And then a specific address, so one single server that you want. There's also the option to import address blocks, subnets, ranges, and addresses. So you can create a spreadsheet, format the columns as required for IPAM, export that to a CSV, and then import it into IPAM. So if you have multiple servers and you have a spreadsheet already and there's 15 different servers with their static IPs and all their settings, then definitely format that to the CSV format that's required with proper column headings, and they match these addresses, or these column headings here, and then export that to CSV and import it. I only have a couple of static IPs, so I'm just going to add this stuff manually. So I'll start with the IP address block. That's the largest network, my major network. And so the network ID is simply 192.168.10. Prefix length is 24. Automatically assign address values yes, and that simply means there's yes or no. If I say yes here and I've got prefix length of 24, that means that my network is between 0 and 255. If I said no here, and then I can change these values, make it something shorter. Under regional internet registry, I can't select anything here because I have an internal address. If I just change this to 12, then I can go down here, hit tab. So now I have to select a regional internet registry. So who assigned me this static address that's publicly available? So I would select that from the list. But if you've got a 10 address or 172.16 to 31 or 192.168, then these are internal address ranges. So you won't have to put in a registry. That's all you do. The other options are optional. Okay, so I should get some information here. IP address blocks. There. So this is the largest address block that I have. If the next thing you would want to do is, I just want to see if I pull the information from DHCP yet. Don't see anything yet. So my DHCP server has a range of addresses, and IPAM should pull that, put that in here. So let's take a look down here. You can select which server is your DHCP server. Retrieve server data. I'll see if I can capture that DHCP information. It should be in IPAM. So let's wait for this to finish. Okay, so since the data is retrieved, I'll just go back to IP address ranges, and there it is. So this is the 192.168.1 network that's on my DHCP server, which is RWDC01, and I have IPAM currently running on server 02. Okay, so the start IP address is 20, it goes to 100. It's nothing virtualized. You can manage your virtual infrastructure through IPAM as well. And it's managed by DHCP. 8.64% utilization. Signed address is 81. I don't think so. Utilized address is, so, and the entire year, so far it's assigned 81. Currently it's utilizing 7. Okay. So, and you can see this utilization here. It says it's underutilized. If we go under Manage, there's IPAM settings. And so you can configure the server discovery. There's custom fields and custom field associations. And this is so that, say you've got a static address pool that you've got configured and you want to know what building, therefore, what floor within a building, which department. So you can put attributes, you can make field associations with your numbering, with your address pools in here. So that when you go to search for the next available static address, you're not just picking it from a major pool, you're picking it for the department that you're in, or the floor of that building that you're in. So right? So it's more powerful that way. There's also this configure utilization threshold, and this is actually why I opened this up, is this utilization, you can set this. So underutilized is less than 20% usage, and over would be over 80%. So you can just change those values if you wanted to. I think they're fine. Okay, so the next thing you want to do, this is the managed by DHCP, so you can create ones that are managed by you as well. So you can add an IP address range. And the network ID is simply 192.168.1. And if I scroll down here, I can state where you want it to start and where I want this static addresses to stop. So 1 to 19 are the addresses. It's going to be managed by IPAM. Service instance, local host, static address assignment. It could be static, dynamic, auto. BIP is virtual IP, or it could be reserved. Leave this to automatic, so I'm leaving all the defaults. Range virtualization properties, so if you enable network virtualization, this is if you have System Center Virtual Machine Manager and it's integrated into your virtual infrastructure. You can also check this box and integrate the two. Again, the custom configurations are listed here. wins in DNS. So I want to set the DNS is 192.168.10, and the DNS suffix for everybody is bacon.local. Gateway, I better put in a gateway, 192.168.1.1. And no reservation of virtual IP. Okay. Alright. So now I have this range from 1.1 to 1.19. It's available for static IP address allocation. Now if I look at IP addresses, I don't have any listed yet. So the next thing you could do is go under tasks and add an IP address. So this is an address that's in use on a single server, just so that there's a record of it. So right now I have 1.8, I think it is. Let me check here. My server 03. Yeah, well, that's convenient that that's showing there. So 192.168.1.8 is the IP address of server 3. So I'll just add that in to IPAM. Managed by service IPAM, localhost. It is a host. It could be a switch or a virtual machine, VoIP. So what type of device is this? It's in use. Static address assignment. You could put in an expiry date if you knew that this IP is going to be relinquished at a certain time. You know that that server is going to be taken down. You could put in a DHCP reservation synchronization. So this does tie in with DHCP. You put in the MAC address. You could dynamically update this to DHCP, and then it would allocate that reservation to that client. I am going to put in this record synchronization. So this is Shane val.bacon.local, and forward lookup zone is bacon on my RWDC using the reverse lookup zone. And it's the same server, and automatically create DNS records. And that's it. I'm going to leave everything else out. So I apply that, creates the address. I failed. And then it adds it. Wonder why that was. Let's try a different one. A 9 is myself. Same server. Let's try this one. No, I like that one. How odd. And I don't see any difference. No, great failure. Oh, for the DNS host record synchronization. So failed in one part. Now that could be that I went through this exercise before and I used that same 1.8. I take a look at my DNS. It's already there, 1.8. Updated yesterday. And the reverse lookup zone. 1.8, and it was put in statically, which is interesting. Everything else is dynamic. I'm just going to delete that and go back to the server and see if that works. PTR record created successfully that time. It comes up as static. The DNS host record. So I'll go back to the host record. Let's see. Delete the one that exists and see if it will create this host record for me. DNS record already exists. I don't see it. Try again. Maybe delete it if you think it's there, and create it. There. I'll go back and see if it's there. I'm not seeing it. It's really weird. Cheat a little bit. Yeah, there it is. Alright, I'm going to move on. So there's these two addresses that were allocated out of the pool, right? So I have 1.9 and 1.8. If I look at the ranges, there are two ranges. One is the DHCP range, 20 to 100. IPAM by default doesn't capture the leases that are actually issued by DHCP, just the range. There is a script that you can run and to capture the actual leases. So if you wanted to, you can do a search here. IPAM, DHCP, lease script probably would be enough. Yeah, so script, Windows Server 2012 IPAM DHCP integration module. PS1's a PowerShell script. And what this will do is it enables IPAM to capture the DHCP lease information rather than just the scope, making it a little more powerful. I haven't actually gone through all this yet, but it's not. Although this is available on Microsoft's site in the Script Center, it's not really recommended for whatever reason. Microsoft probably found some security flaw in there, so they didn't include it in IPAM. But it is there if you want to include the actual lease information. So there's DHCP, your static pool that you have set up, and then a couple of addresses that have actually been issued out of the static address range. The next thing you can do is go to your IPAM, and there's find and allocate available IP addresses. So you can go in here, and the whole idea is that you can use this find available IP address, and it takes a look at your range and the static addresses that have been already taken out of that range. It pings to see if there's a response from an available IP, the next available IP, and checks for a DNS record. And if it doesn't find any of those, then it will give you that IP as the next one that you could use. You simply put in the information and it adds another one of those records for you. You still have to go and put that IP on your server, but it is an automated way to select the next available IP from a spreadsheet. Mine's taken a while, but anyway, that's how you configure IPAM. This will be the next available IP will come up eventually. And that's about it. Thanks.